But before I start that, any questions about quiz number 2? Yes. Yes, okay. Well, I kept it kind of simple, and maybe I was a little too simple about that. But you can write that as a narrative. You know, you can say, among the disciplines that I discovered connected to blank subject of work are archaeology, DNA testing, satellite imagery, spectral analysis of pigments, all of that kind of stuff. You'll see that on the subjects in your search. And so, yeah, basically a short paragraph and give me a kind of a sampling. You don't have to be complete. Some of these subjects would go on forever. And so a paragraph, and I was surprised, or this could be conversational. This one's not quite so academic. I just want to see what you're finding and that you experience the kinds of things that could pop up in your analysis of the artwork. So does that clear up your question? A paragraph. So what is a paragraph? Sometimes I get into my English Comp 1 mode. A paragraph is a group of sentences that express a complete thought. And so a good paragraph opens with an introductory sentence, which is what I was saying. I was really surprised to find a variety of subjects connected to blank, my artwork. And then at the end, you either write a concluding statement, sentence, or a transitional sentence that leads you to the next. I think in this one, it could be either, because on paragraph 3, I'm asking you to kind of get into detail about one particular find. And that comes out of the abstract or description, or it could come from the article itself. And so a paragraph, the middle part, is what you found.
So when you say like disciplinaries, you mean like how they found it, how they analyzed it?
That's a good question. No, that would be, if you get that, that would be in paragraph 3. Paragraph 2 is, and when I talk about disciplines, what I'm really talking about is fields of study. So we kind of, in academia, put together disciplines, and they're kind of, the boundaries are kind of loose, actually. And the more we can blur those lines, the better, in my opinion. But for instance, disciplines in the art can include art, visual art, design, painting, sculpture, etc. Those could be considered disciplines, but the overall one would be art. Then we got art history, and that could be broken down into many, many subjects. There's a lot of information, the history of humankind, because ever since, as far as we know, we've had humans They've been making art. We've been making art. And so other disciplines, not particularly right there in that shell of art. Archaeology. That's really pretty connected to art, but it's more like how to dig things up. And that's a little different than trying to find dinosaur bones, which would be called paleontology. But archaeology is digging up things that people made. And then you can talk about, for instance, I said not to use Tutankhamun, but one of the things that you could touch upon if you were doing Tutankhamun was when Howard Carter opened up that tomb and he died shortly afterwards, and we could talk about the mold on the grain that actually poisoned the air that killed him. And you could talk about the analysis of atmosphere because they tested the air, they found these spores. You could talk about the biology of why these spores would actually be toxic to human. You could talk about biology in terms of how this forms. So am I making it pretty clear? Good. Yeah. And so disciplines almost, but not a quite synonymous bit with subjects. And so, that was a great question. I'm glad you asked that. Anybody? So we're going to talk about the Etruscans. See, this is the first digital civilization. They were the Etruscans until they went online, and then they became the Etruscans. No. Hey, I'm trying. That's why I didn't do stand-up comedy. So Etruscans, you remember when we started a couple of weeks ago looking at Greek culture, we talked about a lot of things, but we principally talked about the cultures in the Aegean Sea, all of those islands, and especially those places that that actually directly contributed to Greek culture. And so, excuse me, bottom line, Greek culture kind of developed out of a previous culture. And we talked about how the Aegeans probably were influenced. There's a lot of evidence to point to this by the Egyptians, because the Egyptians could make all these big boats and stuff, and they traded and spread the culture. Of course, it evolved into Greek culture. Well, the Etruscans lived on the Italian peninsula. Here. And this is the Etruscan civilization. And I'm going to get this. Italy in the Etruscan times, and all of the purple. So it's really kind of a modern day Italy. And you see some of the large islands, Corsica, Sardinia, Sicily. They were pre-Roman Romans. Just like in the Aegean, we had pre-Greek civilizations. And so I wanted to do something a little different though today, and it's in the spirit of in the spirit of research. So I put this together. Some of this is a little old, like 6, 8, maybe 12 months old. And some of it's actually pretty recent. In the news. And so I'm guiding you, I'm kind of introducing you guys through quiz 2 to library resources and journals, professional journals in the discipline. And they are really, as I said, peer-reviewed journals are the gold standard. But you can get your news from a lot of different places. And so, let me show you. These are some of the things I found recently. And I gotta make sure I got my share. Sharing is caring, you know. Ancient footprints. I just got this over the weekend, September 24th. And let me tell you about it. Ancient footprints suggest humans lived in the Americas earlier than once thought. I don't know if you guys had studied indigenous American culture, but there have been all kinds of theories about when the native people came over, and they think that based on DNA analysis, based on artifacts found throughout the North and South American continents, that kind of the accepted theory was that they crossed over from Asia over a land bridge, which is now the Bering Straits, which connects Russia and Alaska, yeah, which I don't know if you guys are not old enough to remember Sarah Palin talking about, I can see Russia from my house. No, anyway, she was from Alaska, and she couldn't. But anyway, you take a look at the map, and they believe that sea level dropped enough for these people to cross. And they came down through the Americas and actually populated the continent. And so these are some footprints they found at White Sands, New Mexico. And White Sands is really kind of an interesting place. It doesn't really have a lot of life there. It's really a desert. And it's the place in New Mexico that's kind of north of El Paso, Texas. And it is the place where, because it was so isolated and there wasn't many people living there, it's where they built and tested the atomic bomb in World War II, White Sands. But at any rate, they didn't destroy all of it, and we found these footprints. And it says White Sands National Park in New Mexico. 2,300 years ago. That almost doubles the time that we know people inhabited North and South America. And so anyway, this is really kind of cool. 2,100 years ago, 2,300 years ago. Now, here's a part of this I want to point out. If you look at credible mainstream news sources, they will almost always writing in the journal Science. So this is not the scientific journal, but they got the information from a journal, a peer-reviewed journal. Science is a great source of information. And that lends credibility to this. And actually tells you where you can find more information about this story. And so it will talk about how Matthew Bennett of Bournemouth University, see, people come from Europe and all over the world to look around, just like Americans do. I mean, it's, at any rate, there it is. Human habitation during the last glacial maximum, and at least 5,000 earlier than widely expected, evidence had suggested. And so that was the limit, that was the outlier. And so anyway, I got to push this down so I can exit out and get back here. And this. Yeah, there we go. It's already on the share. Smithsonian. Oh, there it is. Smithsonian Magazine, another mainstream publication. But at any rate, this stuff, as I was saying, when we were looking at and talking about Egyptian art, they're finding things all of the time. And so sandstone marker, excuse me, may be connected to a military campaign led by the 26th dynasty ruler Apries. And so check this out. There it is. Archaeologists are working to decipher the slab's 15 lines of hieroglyphs. And so reports Owen Jarvis for Live Science per Encyclopedia Britannica. Britannica is another gold source for information. And so I'm not exactly what the relationship of Live Science is. I think it's their ongoing new discoveries part of Britannica. But at any rate, here it is. They're finding, there it is in situ. That was in June. Let's see, where were we at? There we go. And so here's an archaeologist proposed. I got some of these other ones in here just because Rembrandt's actually a pretty famous Western artist, and if we don't cover him in this course, it's too new. But I wanted to put some of these on here just because, make sure I get this on the screen. There we go. Shoot. There we go. And so anyway, this was a little hard to navigate. I just put this on today too. We're still looking at a lot of artwork that we know about. And so all of this stuff that they're finding about the ancient world, it just doesn't stop with the discovery. The research is ongoing. And this is the Night Watch, a very famous Rembrandt painting. And so there's detail of it. And so it hangs in the London National Gallery, and they knew this, they knew that it had been cut down from its original size. And see, here's a couple of Rembrandts. That's a night watch. And this is yet another Rembrandt painting. And so anyway, just say it. And National Geographic. You know how things are online, on the internet. When you guys like shop for stuff, you start getting ads from all over the place. You're looking for shoes. Then all of a sudden your phone gets all of these ads for shoes. That's kind of what happens to me here with never mind. I'm not going to do this. You guys sent this to me. And so anyway, this was kind of cool too. We looked at the Khufu ship, and they have actually found another Khufu ship. And so I open these on my computer. And apparently I actually have some of that subscriber information on there. I didn't know it would block me. But you don't know until you come into class. And finally, there's we're still busy. Tablet from Mesopotamia. Craft store had acquired a 3,600-year-old artifact for its Bible museum, but the court said it had been smuggled and returned to Iraq. And so there's like this big underground market for ancient things, and especially something as important as the Epic of Gilgamesh, which is like in human history, like one of the earliest great epic stories that we had, that was actually written on clay tablets, but nevertheless. And so, you know, these things just kind of float around. People buy them, people sell them. How do they get them? Iraq, war-torn Iraq, going back and forth ever since 2002 or 3. A lot of fighting, a lot of different sides in the conflict, and it's, you know, take stuff, sell it on the market. It's a good way to raise money. Not just in Iraq. Happens in more modern times. This is like a long shot, but can I ask you, have any of you seen the film, The Monuments Men? It's probably on net.
Heard about it, I think.
You heard about it?
It's George Clooney.
Yeah, George Clooney put it together, and it was kind of a guy movie because he had all his pals in the film.
They go, like, it's World War II.
Yes,
They go on there and cover, like, artifacts and, like, statues and paintings and stuff that the Nazis had stolen.
that's exactly it. That is the movie, and that's a very good description. Thanks, Wes. Yeah, the Nazis, when they overran Europe, they looted the museums and they hauled this stuff off in railroad cars. They took so much of it and they hung it up in their places where they live, their official buildings and stuff. And when the war was not going so well and it was certain that they would lose, they would hide this stuff rather than give it up. And where they hid it was in salt mines. By salt mines. Well, typically they're deep and they're not humid.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, because salt.
Yes. And so it's geothermal, the temperature does not fluctuate much, if at all, and the humidity's out of the air. And so anyway, these guys, George Clooney and Bill Murray and Matt Damon and all George Clooney's pals, they're in this film, and it's a true story, by the way, of how the Americans went to find all of this stuff. And they were actually, because the Russians were involved, they tried to beat the Russians to get in it. Anyway, so and let me get my share back here. But Lidse, Atonga, I'm glad you're here. Slideshow from beginning. Make sure I got the share right. Nope, I went that one. Okay. Etruscans. And I got a bunch of, bless you.
Thank you.
There's where I was, there's some more Rosetta Stone. We were talking about that. This is from National Geographic, how it enabled researchers to unlock the secrets of ancient civilization. Tiny traces of DNA in cave dust may unlock the secret life of Neanderthals. So anyway, this is the kind of stuff I'm talking about with other disciplines. DNA analysis it's not art, but it's biology, absolutely.
So for the second paragraph, like just find like a couple of other articles that cross-reference to that other stuff.
Yes. And so anyway, I looked this one up because I read this over the summer. I forgot when it came in, about the famed ancient Viking warrior was biologically female. And I found out that there was a series you could stream, ancient female warrior or something. I forgot the title. But anyway, sometimes they actually end up making movies about these things. When I was talking about the Monuments Men. So anyway, Smithsonian, they found this tomb of an ancient warrior. than it was in the Northern European area, I think perhaps Sweden, bottom line. And this other stuff here, Parthenon lighting, talked about that. We'll see some examples of this. And science of grave of Iron Age warriors found with weapons in Russia. Also, I wanted you to see that because although we kind of look at these areas, we start with the Mesopotamian, we go to Egypt, we go to the Aegean, and now we're going to the Italian, Greece, and then the Italian peninsula. I'll tell you something about why we kind of look at those more than others, but we're actually starting to look at others more now. The ones that we see, ones that are in the book, are the low-hanging fruit. By that I mean, they're easy to spot, partly because all of those civilizations that we've seen had built large edifices, buildings, pyramids, temples, tombs, etc. We got the pyramids, we got the ziggurat at Ur, we got the palace at Knossos, we got the Parthenon. And so that's kind of it. They've been, at least until more recently, they just been following the architecture. Why am I bringing this up? Early on in this class, I was showing you some examples of people who did not build permanent buildings, like some of the people in North America, in South America, in Australia, here, Russia, etc. And so we didn't have those large surviving buildings to kind of point us to the culture. But in today's world, we're actually finding a lot of stuff from these more nomadic peoples. And so this is a Mona Lisa story about MRI kind of technology, where they found a drawing under the Mona Lisa. Here's a story about the Elgin marbles, which are now called pediment sculptures. And it's a kind of a good look at what that whole issue is about, both sides and so on. I thought it was pretty good. And so ancient coffins, major 59 coffins in Egypt, found all at one time, just boom. And so there we are, back to Etruscan culture. And so one of the things that I want to kind of point out, I should say, and this is a tomb, necropolis, and basically it's where necropolis, necro, means dead. And so it's a place like the Acropolis, but it's the necropolis. It's a place where they put a lot of tombs, and it wasn't just a graveyard, it was actually, they built a lot of monuments. And here's the interior of one of the tombs. We don't particularly know where the body is, but you could see kind of like the way it's put together, kind of like Egyptian, it's kind of like Greek, And so you could see a lot of this, as I was saying, this cross-pollination, how cultures influence one to the next. And so fibula with organizing lions. A fibula is like a brooch or something. It's an ornamentation that would hang on your chest, most likely. And so, and this is from a tomb, orientalizing lions. That's an interesting term. When we talked about that, when we talked about ancient Mesopotamia and the kind of lions that we saw that don't exist, the Asian lions, the Cape lions, and so we're not sure. We think this is actually a stylistic thing rather than something that could depict a species no longer. But here we go. This is, like I say, when you find architecture, you'll find a lot more around it. And like I say, that's like the big red flag. That's like the fireworks going off. If you can find tombs, this is a model, by the way, but there's enough that we know what these look like. And so it's kind of like Egyptian culture, kind of the hypo style where you have columns. It's kind of like Minoan culture where the columns don't really have fluting or anything. And in fact, they're colored. They're not white. Marble. There may be marble under that, but bottom line, they use a lot of what they call terracotta, which is clay, which is used in ceramics. It's used in pottery. And that was like the big resource they had in the Italian peninsula. The other thing they have abundantly is volcanic rock. Because as I was saying, this whole part of Southern Europe is very volcanically and seismologically active. A lot of earthquakes, a lot of volcanoes. And so anyway, it's got the slope roof, but it extends. You got statues around the top. As we talked about the Parthenon, they decorated a lot of things with statues. And so you can see the influence, you can see the difference. And so they were really kind of, how should I say this? They were interested in the memory of their ancestors, the dead people. And so sarcophagus, which is, as we described, as we talked about, this is a tomb. And you see painted terracotta made of clay that's been hardened. And what we see here, the figures of the people, the representation of the people who are buried inside of the sarcophagus. And as I said, the necropolis, ancient idea that you put your dead all together, one place. We do it, still do that today. It's called a cemetery. Yes.
So necropolis, is that where it comes from? Latin, from next?
From
Does the word necropolis come from, like, is that derived from the Latin word next? With that, is that why?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. That's it. That's out of Latin. So that's another thing we're starting to see too. We're starting to see this kind of fusion of Greek language and Roman Latin language. And so, yeah, like, what is it? Necropolis. There's a lot of other words that start with that. But yeah, that means dead, the place of the dead. And typically this was like in a special place, sometimes up on a hilltop. But these things, these traditions, like I said, they live on, yes.
Doesn't Polis mean city? Doesn't that mean city of the dead?
Yeah, it sure does. Necropolis, yeah, just, and that goes right with Hollis. Actually, the root word kind of spreads out with a lot of things. Hollis is a city, like Indianapolis. It is the place. Indianapolis, it's derived from the Greek, Roman. Acropolis, Acropolis. Let me see, there was another one. Oh, and it also is the root word that gets stretched in a different way about people, which is where people live, is in a city. And then you get the idea of governance, which is politics, all of that. But you're right. People, city, that's exactly right. And here's what a necropolis would look like. And forgive me if I mispronounce this, Vandi Takacha. And here they are. That first slide I showed you with the painted inside. This is what we're talking about. This was what those buildings would look like. Oh, I skipped over this. Apulu. This is an interesting sculpture, painted terracotta. Like I say, they really use a lot of terracotta. Bottom line is that it's kind of like, almost like archaic Greek, but it shows some signs of being classical Greek too, because the pose is a little more natural. The way the drapery is on the body, it's probably a little more stylized than what we see in high classical Greek sculpture. And again, the hair, that's always the mystery. Did they wear their hair this way? Is this always what they did, braid their hair and their beards and stuff? Or was it just an artistic device, a style? That's how you do hair. But bottom line, you can see a lot of that influence from ancient Greece right here. And again, I showed you the map, but the map I should have expanded out a little bit, because what we're talking about is that the Italian peninsula on the east is bordered by the Adriatic Sea. And across the Adriatic, we have a lot of the Slavic countries, but when you go south, you're there, you're on Greece. And so it was a short distance, considerably shorter than the distance between, say, Alexandria, Egypt, and Greece. But anyway, Apollo. We're starting to see the morphing of Roman gods based on Greek models. And so, again, and here's the interior. These are kind of elaborate. There's a tomb of the shields, and it's called that because of all of these discs. And they're kind of interesting. They've been just cut out of rock. And in a lot of cases, they're almost like Egyptian in what they did inside these tombs. This is called the Tomb of Reliefs. You saw the last one, Tomb of the Shields and Chairs. These were, we can guess that these were warriors. And shields would be one of the most important things that you would own as a warrior would be your shield. And so anyway, this is crazy, skipping. There it is. But this is kind of an Egyptian thing. You see, you got the rope, you got the machete, you got the vessels for wine and cooking and stuff. It's like, it's not really the stuff you would need in the afterlife. It's carvings of things that you would need in the afterlife. But this whole idea of how you treat your dead is not dissimilar from what we saw in Egypt. And here are some of the paintings, which as I was saying, this is probably better examples of Greek painting than we actually can find in Greece. This is very much out of the Greek style. Looks a lot like the kind of figures that you find on Greek pottery. And there we go. And the way this is put together, the tomb of hunting and fishing. Again, these tombs are decorated based on, we believe, what these people did during their lifetime. If you were a hunter or a fisher, this may be where you would be buried. Can you guys see this? I put the star on this one. This is probably considered, yes.
Are those the founders of Rome? Like I heard the story about two brothers.
Romulus and Remus.
Oh, Romulus and Remus, and they both get raised by something like that.
That's this. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I don't know if they're the founders of Rome or I think it was Rome.
Yes, it is. And so, yeah, the Etruscan culture was really kind of a loose organization of city-states. And Rome kind of emerges out of that. The Roman Republic, it becomes the biggest city. And this mythology Xander was talking about, he's like, that's spot on. That's the mythology that there were these two twins, Romulus and Remus, and they were abandoned. And they were raised by this she-wolf, or in this case, it's called a Capitoline wolf. But she-wolf, you could see she feeding these two boys. The mythology, I want to tease this out a little bit because I think this is kind of important. Back in the day, back in ancient times, even back in medieval times, in this culture, I'm not sure about around the world, but it was kind of a Western thing. It goes through Rome, goes through Europe, and that is that if you did not want children, what you did was take them out in the woods and leave them. And the wolves would eat the baby. I know, it's horrible. But it is what they did. And we have, even in our folklore, a lot of stories through the years about children getting lost in the woods or like Little Red Riding Hood, for example, and the wolf eats grandma and then waits for Little Red Riding Hood to eat her. Hansel and Gretel put out in the woods, jealous stepmother. See, these things persist like for thousands of years, but that was the cruel truth of what happened was that when you want babies, put them out to the wolf. Sometimes it may have been, we don't really know a lot about this. We think that in some cases, it may have been if a child had some kind of disability or something that they would put the child or the children out in the woods and let the apex predators eat it. And so anyway, but this is a kind of a twist on all of that because these babies were left out there. And the wolf, the she-wolf raised them. And they grew up and they were great people and they founded, as Andrew said, they were the founders of Rome. They were the ones that built the city. And when you think about a lot of the kind of tales we even still have today about things like that. How about Tarzan? Plane crash or whatever happened, middle of the jungle, Central Africa, raised by the gorillas. So anyway, yeah, this is what this is. Now these two statues of Romulus and Remus here, those we believe now are add-ons from maybe the 12th century Common Era, so in the 1100s. We don't know, but we think that these are add-ons. But bottom line, this is probably the most noteworthy sculpture of the Etruscan culture. And again, it points to what's going to happen in Rome. And so a chimera, well, that was another beast, and we think a mythical beast. And this comes out of Etruscan culture. As you can see, they were pretty good at casting bronze, but so were the Greeks. And so this is the first half of the 4th century BCE. So it was a 300s BCE. And the chimera, we'll see this figure occur and recur. And so it's a multi-headed beast. And as you can see in this case, the tail is a snake and so on. And basically a lion. So we get these, again, just like we saw in Minoan culture, Egyptian culture, Greek culture, mythical beast. And this is an engraving, and as you can see, they were very, very accomplished artists. 2nd century BCE, they were also accomplished builders. This archway is like that. And the other thing is, you can see the Greek influence about the columns, about the statues that decorate everything. Again, arch construction. Kind of touching around about this. This is really, we saw in Egypt a lot of post and lintel architecture, not exclusively, but a lot of post and lintel. And then we saw In Greece, the hypostyle, which means that there are columns holding up a larger roof. And we start to see emerge out of the Etruscan Roman culture, the archway. And I talked about that a little bit already, that it takes the area from here to here and distributes the weight on a wider surface. And so it's stronger, becomes kind of the choice of Etruscan and Roman architecture. Sarcophagus, again. Another sarcophagus is this. And these are, in a lot of ways, we find these because the sarcophagi would be in those tombs like I showed you earlier. So there was a lot of respect for the dead. There really wasn't a lot of gold or anything that you could loot from these places. So we have actually quite a lot of examples. Early 1st century BCE. Getting into the point where Rome starts to emerge on the Italian peninsula. And that's why that's the last slide. That's really the end of the chapter, and it kind of points to what's going to happen in Rome. And I gotta, I gotta make sure I gotta share. Well, I kind of left the content a little short today. Wanted to make sure I had time enough to answer your questions about quiz 2. Wanted to spend some time showing you some of the mainstream news that actually comes out of places like Science and The Guardian, which is a British newspaper, and the New York Times occasionally publishes things. Popular Mechanics, the Smithsonian, National Geographic, et cetera, et cetera. So anyway, the knowledge is out there. We are in the midst of a knowledge explosion. That's why these links, these stories are written. And so our understanding of ancient times is becoming much clearer almost on a daily basis. So that's really all I have. I was supposed to go to 12:15. I'm tired. I could take a nap. I went to see the Rolling Stones last night. They were cool. All right, well, I'll see you guys on Wednesday.
So I chose the Great Sphinx and an article about how satellite imagery has been used to track like the wind patterns in the sand around the Nile,
Yeah,
and how like the Great Sphinx, some like think it might have been used to portray something about the wind. Like, would that count?
that is
It's about the land of the Nile.
that is perfect.
Great.
Yeah.
Good. Thank you.
That's what I want. Yes. See ya.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank
Have a
you.
great day.
Yeah, have a nice day. Enjoy this nice fall day.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.